Good morning, guys. Welcome to my compound life. This is a channel where we build assets, we build habits, and most importantly, we build freedom. That should really be financial freedom as well as time freedom for you and I. Apology, I sound terrible. I didn't sleep a lot last night. Still have a terrible hangover from the party last night, so bear with me, guys. But Happy New Year. Happy 2026. Wishing everyone a prosperous 2026. Make lots of money, stack assets harder, look after your health, and yeah, in general, just stay safe out there. Okay. Yeah, so it's a New Year 1st of Jan special video from my compound life because I'm in my bathroom. Okay, so I hope everyone out there are good, and thanks again for watching my video. This is another Bitcoin daily video, so hit the like, hit subscribe, turn on the notification, and let me know who you are in the comment section. If you somehow become my 84th to 90th subscribers, I'm really low in my subscriber count, so I'd be really appreciative if you guys can become my subscribers and follow my daily content on Bitcoin. I'll be covering news and with some alphas every now and then. Okay, so remember to subscribe, guys. Yeah, I hope you guys won't hear any of the outside noise. I haven't got my mic on. Very lazy for setting things up this morning. Go. Okay, so the binman's finished. Okay, so we should have less yeah, we should have less outside noise. I think they'll be going soon. But anyway, let's start with Bitcoin price action. At the time of recording, we are at around 87,742 for Bitcoin. Essentially, Bitcoin is trading around 87,500. And in the past 24 hours, it went down small tiny bit, like 1 to 2%. So I think I've been looking at the daily chart, it does seem we are coiling up, and eventually it will have a breakout soon. But mind you, breaking out does not mean it will go up or down. We simply have to wait and see, right? But with how the market sentiment, it does seem we may be breaking downwards with higher probability. But I don't know yet, I can't tell. So we started at around 88,500, and obviously Bitcoin gone up to about around 80, just under 89-ish, and a low of 87,000. So the market is still very, very slow because of New Year's. Not a lot of excitement, not a lot of trading, buying, selling going on. But it does seem it has a lot of market manipulation. Essentially it's range bound, shoots up to about high or mid of 89,000, and immediately it gets dragged down to about 87,000, and that's usually just within 1 to 2 hours. So a lot of manipulation. As long as you're holding spot, you're fine. A quick look at the fear and greed index. We are at the moment in the extreme fear zone of 19. We were at about 20 yesterday, but of course at 20 we obviously headed down to extreme fear zone, right? So mind you, that's not a lot of great sentiment so far in the past couple of holiday trading periods. Okay, so initially I thought we have gotten out from extreme fear when we kind of gone back up to the fear zone, but anyway, yeah, anyway, it doesn't seem like it anytime soon, because obviously at that time not gold, but silver dropped a bit. So maybe that would be a readjustment of the silver price. So I initially thought it was, rotating. There's a huge rotation going on, and hoping that it could rotate into Bitcoin, but I guess it's mainly due to the market maker. So in terms of Bitcoin price, you kind of felt nothing has changed for the past year. We have been kind of range bound between $87,000 to about $90,000. Okay, so it feels like the whole situation for Bitcoin is being suppressed, whereas everything else just spike. So this pain, trust me, will continue, right, until we can break and secure the 50 days moving average, which is around 90,000 USD. However, it is still dropping fast, so bear that in mind. So implications, I think short term, it's still neutral for Bitcoin, but neutral onto bearish. Okay, neutral in a way because we are still, range bound, retracing, side chops. But at the same time, the sell pressure, it's pretty heavy. As soon as we get to about near 90,000, I think the sell pressure would just keep on selling, right? People would just be more than willing to sell off, because Bitcoin has definitely not performed for 2025. But of course, we do have 2026 to look forward to now. It's the 1st of Jan, so happy New Year to all of you. I think it's a lot more things to look forward to. Let's hope, we don't get into a bear market. We could get into a bear market, mind you, but we'll see. But anyway, let's take a quick look at ETF. Let's look at Bitcoin ETF. Bitcoin ETF, yesterday it was bearish. 31st of December, we closed with a bearish situation, outflow of $348 million. Okay, so we had such a great inflow on the 30th of December. That was 355 million. But as soon as we hit 31st of December, 348 million outflow. Okay, so a day of bull and followed by a day of bear. And essentially whatever gain that's been made on the 30th of December, everything's got wiped off. Okay, so looking at the weekly, so I think, looking at weekly data, so I don't think there'll be any market activities for ETF today, but weekly data shows for this week, it's actually bearish, 782 million outflow for Bitcoin, and it's actually even greater versus last week, right? So last week we were at around 497 million worth of outflow. So not good. For the months of December, it was bearish overall with 1.09 billion worth of outflow. However, in comparison to November, it was a lot more higher at about 3.48 billion worth of outflow. Okay, and in terms of Ethereum is around 72 million worth of outflow for the 31st of December. For Ethereum, it's for the 31st of December, it's all outflow too, 72 million outflow versus the 30th of December was around 68 million worth of inflow. So the same as Bitcoin, whatever gain we had for the 30th of December gets wiped out on the 31st of December. So monthly performance for Ethereum specifically, I think for December, it was a total outflow of 616 million worth of outflow versus November, that was a lot more at $1.42 billion. And the only one that's doing pretty well, it's the Solana ETF, the SOL ETF. 31st of December, it had received 2.3 million worth of inflow. 30th of December, 5.2 million inflow, and overall giving Solana ETF December a total of 147 million worth of inflow. However, in comparison to November, it actually received 419 million worth of inflow. So about, just not that high for December. I think a lot of it due to the trading activities going on in December. It's a given. But anyway, let's quickly look through some of the news that moves Bitcoin price. Okay, I think Bitcoin year end down with huge disappointment. You're disappointed, I'm disappointed too. Bitcoin down nearly 5.33% for whole of 2025. From about 93,000 back in January the 1st. And then we somehow close in December, 31st of December, with around $88,000 worth of Bitcoin. So a little bit off drilling down. 2025 year, Bitcoin have been up and down, high in October, but of course it crashed soon after 10th of October. So now we're kind of trending and ended the year a lot more lower than we first started in January the 1st. So if we quickly look through some of the data for Bitcoin. So for the full of December 2025, we closed with a loss of 2.87%. So meaning we had a terrible Q4. With October, it was bearish at negative 3.69%. November, it was bearish again at negative 17.67%. And of course, December was bearish at 2.97%. So overall, for Q4, it was overall bearish. Bitcoin return Q4 was negative 28.28%. So as a result, for the whole of 2025, if you bought Bitcoin in, 1st of Jan and then decide to sell on the 31st of December 2025, you would have made a loss of 6.3% last year, right? Not this year anymore. It's because we're on the 2026, 1st of Jan, okay? But come on, guys, be serious about this. Is it really that bad for Bitcoin? Because Bitcoin CAGR from year of inception, that was like 14 years ago. It's around 96.3% CAGR, right, per annum. It's returning us roughly about CAGR of 96.3%. So that was like only 14 years. Each year it's returning about close to 100%. So it's not actually performing that badly, right? So an asset that grew to all-time high, 126,000, which obviously some might argue that we are at around 87. You know, we drop about 87 to 88%, with further, you know, downside possibility, right? So that's why I think people are seeing this fact and felt that how bearish it is for Bitcoin. So I think, you know, it's still long-term bullish, but we simply just have to suck it in and get through with it, right? So get through with this short-term bearishness, get through with the fact that we never had a Santa rally. It was a terrible September, October, November, December for Bitcoin. Well, technically speaking, for September was okay. It's just mainly October, November, December of 2025, Q4 was absolutely terrible. However, things will definitely pick up. We just have to wait. Other news that moves Bitcoin price, I covered a bit of that yesterday. Let me just quickly reiterate. I think something that when market opens, it will not be fantastic, right? Especially when you're holding Bitcoin, when you're holding Bitcoin ETF, holding strategy, you're holding Bitcoin proxy, you're holding Tesla, etc. Or even like Tesla, I think it dropped. I wouldn't say substantially, but overall for the past couple of days, it definitely dropped. Well, some might argue it's because people are just, you know, tax harvesting, wash trading, you know, they just sell loss and buy back in again so that, you know, to obviously try and cover their losses through tax, right? So some might argue that's essentially what's happening towards the end of the year. So that can also be one of the key reasons to explain. But I still think that the US economy data that came out, the Q3 GDP data, will eventually, is playing some role in terms of dragging down the Bitcoin price as well as other growth assets price, because US Q3 GDP, it grew by approximately 4.3%. I think, you know, the expectation was around 3.3%. So as a result, it will short-term be bearish, because this will essentially indicate that Jerome Powell, Fed, will not have any rate cut in coming January. And traders, investors, they don't like this news, right? They like rate cut, they like infinite money printing from the Fed. But if that's the case, it will be terrible for the US economy. It will be terrible for everywhere else, because usually our government, even in the UK too, they kind of also look at what's happening in the US and decide whether they need to apply more quantitative easing, money printing, etc., or increase or decreasing rate, right? So, and we all know that, you know, increasing rate, it's in a way, it's to help ease off some of the country's pressure, right? So I mean, there are always pros and cons when we kind of looking through this. But overall, if you are a Bitcoin holder, or if you hold MicroStrategy or Tesla shares, you know what, short term, it's not going to look good, right? So bear that in mind. This will only be a short term thing. What you need to do is just hodl through, like, you know, especially if you're on spot. It doesn't matter, right? If you're on spot, you know, you just need to pay a lot more attention if you're on leverage. That's all. Other interesting news section, Tether. They bought more Bitcoin. Tether bought about 8,888 Bitcoin, and they added that into, you know, they took it out from the exchange and added that into their treasuries. If I'm sure everyone knows Tether, you know, USDT, the stable coin. So it's very good that Tether starts to buy Bitcoin for reserve, right? Because they know that they'll need something to back up the USDT, right? So that's why Bitcoin comes into play. So very, very strategic, very, very good. It's always good to see big companies like Tether, big in crypto, right? They buy, it shows market confidence, especially, when they take the Bitcoin out from exchanges. It essentially means, it will reduce a lot of the sell pressure moving forward for Bitcoin. Although it doesn't really have much price impact for Bitcoin, but somehow I felt, it will be long-term bullish because, big companies hold Bitcoin now, right? And there will be a lot less sell pressure moving forward. Another news, somehow it falls under other interesting news section because I simply do not think it would affect Bitcoin price anytime soon. It is the Fed overnight print. So they obviously printed a whopping 74 billion USD. So it's biggest since 2020 COVID crisis. But I need to caveat, not exactly a crisis when the Fed prints, right? So let me explain to you why, right? So the Fed obviously printed 74 billion injected through the overnight repos. It means Fed providing banks with buying securities like treasuries and agreeing to sell them back soon. So it helps the banking system to boost up the liquidity inside, right? This helps banks handle funding needs often at year end. Okay, so for 2026, we will need to see or hope Fed continue to print a large amount or apply quantitative easing or whatever that whatever new names that they come out with. We need to see that continue. Otherwise, the sign of recovery or that cat bounce, we won't see any of that coming anytime soon. Okay, so we just essentially need to see Fed continue to print. But mind you, continue printing does not mean Bitcoin price to go up immediately, right? Very likely it won't come in until much later this year, right? Q3 even Q4. Okay, so bear that in mind. Another thing that I want to cover, so this is quite an important one. If you hold MicroStrategy, so like myself, I hold a bit of MicroStrategy too. MSTR continue to crash, so not a good sign. So Strategy, a company run by Michael Saylor, I'm sure every one of you guys know about this. It's crashing 8 times faster than Bitcoin. So many people on social media are essentially calling the company a systemic risk, okay? Because the fact that MicroStrategy holds so much. In terms of Bitcoin, they hold over 672,000 worth of Bitcoin. That's about 3.2% of the full Bitcoin supply, right? So MicroStrategy just hit a 52-week low of $151.83, essentially wiping out nearly 66% of its 2025 value, right? And the cause of decline or the cause of crash, I just call it decline for now, it's not really a crash, maybe a crash. Okay, depends how you see it, right? Well, the fact that I hold MicroStrategy, I don't really call it a crash, but decline. So decline is essentially because of decline of Bitcoin price. Obviously Bitcoin crashed from 126,000 to about 87,000. Resulting strategy share to have, heavy share dilution. Strategy also had the issue of, delisting risk. and of course the NAV premium collapse, right? So obviously Bitcoin's down this year by about 6.3%. MicroStrategy shares, if you hold them, you definitely see that it dropped by about 49%. So in a way, the NAV premium is pretty much over, right? So what's happening here? So for months, Wall Street paid 2.5 times the price of Bitcoin to own MicroStrategy shares, right? So that was the leverage trade. Now, institutions are kind of dumping the proxy. They dump MicroStrategy and rotate into spot ETF buying, where they pay, they pay a lot less, right? They pay per value. So cutting out the middleman like strategy. So if you buying MicroStrategy, ticker MSTR now, you are buying the dip. You think you might be buying the dip, but be careful, right? Because you're not exactly buying the dip, because you are in a way betting that the Wall Street will or may voluntarily overpay for an asset that they can essentially get it cheaper elsewhere, right? So be ultra careful when it comes to strategy, because it's not exactly buying the dip, right? So if you think buying now for Bitcoin, you are buying the dip, yes, indeed you are. However, for strategy, it's not exactly the dip, okay? So be careful with that. And I kind of felt there will definitely be more dips coming for Bitcoin. The fact that we are in, that there's no price action, no indication that we are getting out of the bearish situation anytime soon. So essentially, I do anticipate more dips coming. So that's why if anytime Bitcoin dips, MicroStrategy will dip even further, even faster, right? So bear that in mind. Yeah, so bear that in mind, we're not exactly investing with other retail investors anymore. Essentially, we're trading against institutions. So MicroStrategy currently it's trading at around $151 at the time of recording. So be ultra careful. Not the best time to buy strategy shares, and don't assume this is the only dip, like we have totally bottomed for strategy, okay? Because I do anticipate more bottom coming, okay? Whew. Maybe let me just bring you one last hopium news. So Ghana just passed law to legalize Bitcoin and crypto for its citizens. Fantastic for Ghana. Now, Ghana, 35 million of citizens, they may get to buy Bitcoin and crypto, right? Fantastic news. So not much happened in the past 24 hours, apart from, I think worth calling out will be the Fed overnight print. But again, it's not a big deal. It's not going to pump Bitcoin anytime soon. We are still pretty bearish, so bear that in mind. And Happy New Year, guys. Stop looking at charts, go out. It's a sunny day out there now, right now in the West Midlands. So very likely I'm just gonna go out, have a walk in my hangover. Feel bad, my voice sounds horrible. Drop a like, hit subscribe, leave me comments, let me know how you guys are. It's rather lonely sometime, 1st of January. I'm sure many of you are probably still in bed, listening maybe, or not even listening, because the number of views yesterday was absolutely terrible, right? But anyway, it's good to see you, and I'll see you in the next video. Happy 2026. Bye.